It's a feeling that's flowing like a river. Time to swap them dollar signs for dreams. There's a river running through and that flows through you and me.
I'm John Osborne, broadcasting from Spokane, Washington. Today we'll be talking about the largest all-federal irrigation system and how that system is threatening the survival of salmon. If we go back about 200 years, really the blink of an eye in time, on August 12th of 1805, the Lewis and Clark expedition stepped from the Missouri River watershed into the Columbia River watershed. And with those steps, it entered a river of life, a place where 15 million to maybe 50 million salmon returned each year to spawn and renew a cycle of life, to spawn in those natal forest streams and in the deserts of the Columbia River system. It was a place where people lived in dynamic equilibrium with the river, a river that supported vibrant native cultures, a native river itself that supported incredible runs of salmon, the richest runs of salmon on Earth. In a very short period of time, 200 years, profound changes have come to this river, and a number of runs of salmon have been forced into extinction. Part of the problem has been loss of habitat. Other problems include the construction of large dams. Perhaps the largest of the dams, and the one that comes to most people's mind, is Coulee Dam. Coulee Dam was largely a personal decision by President Roosevelt in the 1930s. There were choices made available to him, and he elected to build the big dam, the high dam, in part to make it an irrigation project. It was the Depression, and there were Depression-era farmers that he was hoping to help. The dam was constructed. It blocked just incredible runs of salmon up into the upper Columbia and into Canada. And the consequences for the river have been profound, even as the dam itself has produced great benefits in terms of hydropower and flood control. But we continue to live with the environmental legacy and the impacts that it has had on native cultures in the Columbia River system. It's been clear as time has progressed that the remaining runs of salmon are in trouble, and as river flows continue to be impacted by withdrawals, in part for irrigated agriculture, and as we face a time of climate change, those salmon are in more jeopardy with each passing year. Washington State has been no friend of salmon, and that has been particularly true in recent decades. Still today, the state is pressing ahead to withdraw large amounts of water from the river, even in the face of recommendations from the National Academies of Science in 2004. Shortly thereafter, Washington State passed a law to aggressively pursue new opportunities to build new dams and to take more water from the Columbia River. Part of the impetus behind the dam building frenzy in eastern Washington is a problem on the Columbia Plateau. And this is a problem that is inherently linked to the history of President Roosevelt's decision in creating the Columbia Basin Irrigation Project. Now, if you have been to Coulee Dam, you might have recognized the pipes that run from Lake Roosevelt, the water impounded behind the dam, uphill. Those pipes carry water for irrigation. In the 1940s, farmers who were in the area had the opportunity to vote whether or not to receive that federal water, that heavily subsidized federal water called project water. Most of the farmers covering about 2/3 of the potential irrigation project, voted to accept the water and the conditions that went with it. About 1/3 of the farmers, about 1/3 of the area covered by the potential project declined to accept the conditions of federal water. So in the succeeding 60 years, those farmers have continued to dryland wheat farm, and some have put down wells. Those wells have been pumping groundwater. Again, these are basalt aquifers in eastern Washington. They don't recharge. The water is fossil water, 10,000 to 20,000 years old. And not surprisingly, if you pump and mine these aquifers, the water tables drop. It's been aggravated because thousands of these wells are illegal. That is, that because of the nature of these aquifers, that there is layer upon layer of basalts, that if you don't case the wells, then the water will drop through the hole created in the construction of the well. And so you pierce one layer after another, the water just flows down through the hole. So such that if you put your ear to the well, you can hear the water cascading. And these are called cascading wells, and they're illegal because you're only allowed to take water from one layer at a time. The state has had decades to address this problem, and it has refused to do so. The problem of mining these aquifers in eastern Washington was recognized in the 1960s. In the 1970s, 1971, this was clearly recognized. The decision was put to the state. The recommendation from economists at Washington State University was that if you were going to go ahead and mine these aquifers, you only had about 30 years of water, and the farmers who were irrigating needed to amortize their investments over those decades and then transition out. Well, if you fast forward 30 years to the early 2000s, sure enough, the water tables are dropping dramatically, sometimes up to 10 feet per year. Farmers and others, business interests, are now well organized and pushing and gaining political support for spending billions of dollars for a small group of landholders in eastern Washington to receive federal water that had been rejected in the 1940s. So the press is on. In December of 2010, the Bureau of Reclamation and the Washington Dept of Ecology issued a draft proposal, and the public comment period closed in January of 2011, and we expect in 2012 the final proposal. This proposal will cost the public an extraordinary amount of money, probably $1 to $4 billion. It will benefit a handful of economic interests. It will likely damage shrub steppe habitat, which is already exists in only remnant areas and supports grouse and other species that are in jeopardy. And it will take more water out of the Columbia River and further threaten salmon. So despite these decades where we have witnessed such devastation to salmon runs in the Columbia River system by Grand Coulee and other dams, we are now witnessing a continued assault on the Columbia River and Columbia River flows by Washington State and the US Bureau of Reclamation. And that's today's program. Thank you for listening. And thank you for caring about water, about the land, and about the future of our communities.
It's a feeling that's flowing like a river. Time to swap them dollar signs for dreams. There's a river running through what I left flows through